I want to pose one other question for people to kind of discuss here, and that is it was the last question I had, and we'll just kind of roll into whatever topics we want to cover. But I titled this "Back to Normal." Right. So as the vaccine rolls out, what's the impact in 2021 on e-commerce as people move back to normal, as people move back to going back into an office, and how do sellers plan for that? For the shift back? Does e-commerce stay the juggernaut that it is, or does e-commerce maybe take a little bit of a step back because it had extra a little extra oomph? um, Rachel, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I actually think that it's not going to take a step back at all. It just actually reminds me of the situation with QR codes. So I didn't ever use them. I knew the app was on my phone, but I mean, the only thing that I did with QR codes was give clients advice on what their landing page needed to include so they didn't get suspended or something like that. And this year, everyone started using QR codes at the restaurants. And so now all customers kind of already have this built-in knowledge of, oh, it's a QR code. I know what to do with that because I've been to a contactless menu at a restaurant. Like, I know how to use this now. So you can do more with customers in terms of getting their information or interacting with them in a more authentic way because of this year that you wouldn't have. Like, it's such an interesting kind of seismic shift where people just had to learn how to go online and had to learn how to do a lot more digital stuff.
Yeah, I remember in 2016 when I went to China, QR codes were everywhere, and I had to download an app so that I could, you know, actually use it. And then I came back and people were using them at trade shows, but nobody knew what to do. And you're right. Now it's definitely more mainstream. Robin, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot more. My parents never did like the click list and things like that. They were like, oh, that's too much work. But now they're using Clickless all the time. And so we're going to see that same adoption. People who have overcome that big hurdle where it was too hard for them to get on. Now their parents, their kids have sat with them on Zoom and walked them through it enough times that they're going to be able to continue to do that. So you're going to see that surge. Now there will be a little bit of a wave, and some industries will have more sustained growth, and some will have that ebb out because experiential shopping is still going to be important for some niches. So I think that we can plan on continued growth, but again, it comes down to knowing your customer and knowing if experiential shopping is going to be a big play for your customers, then making sure you have some of those in-person channels as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, Robin. I think so. The issue is like, how bad does the recession get if we have one? But all this did was accelerate the growth of e-commerce as far as, a percentage of overall retail within America. We're still way behind the rest of the world and way behind China. So if you look at China or cultures that are shop online a lot, and you look at the percentage of products bought online there versus here, we have a long way to go. So I think that the death of retail was just accelerated, but it's not going to stop all of a sudden. It has to be an experiential, like toy stores where you can play with the toys is going to be really the only thing that survives. Like Toys R Us needed to change their business model in order to live. And so I think that there will be some industries that will do much better moving forward as people can get back together. Like party supplies were absolutely decimated during 2020, but they're going to get better. And I think that certain things will maintain. Very few might pull back, but I think overall e-commerce is only going to continue to grow.
Brandon, when was the last time you were in China, and when are you planning to go next?
So we were there right when the virus broke out for Chinese New Year last year. So last January, we barely got out.
Yeah. So you were like Jing and Eddie. Jing and Eddie were literally following the virus. I think they were in Hong Kong, and then
or
they
the
were
virus was
literally like
following
in.
them.
Then they were like
Frankfurt,
in
New
Italy.
York. Yeah.
Then you were in Italy when Italy shut down, and then they came back to Chicago. I was like, get out of here.
That's amazing. Yeah, I remember. So we had to fly out of we flew out of Hong Kong, but I took a private car from Shenzhen 3 days early to park in the hotel and like quarantine in the hotel because I was afraid they were going to shut the border. The day that we flew out, they shut the border down. And then I remember going to the toy fair in New York and seeing Eddie and everybody there and Jing there, and it was like, why are we even here? The virus is in New York already. We were like 40 cases, and like it was just increasing every day. And so, yeah, it's
so when will you plan to go back?
I would have liked to have gone back now. I have obligations. It's just tough. If you go now, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and then when you come back, you have to quarantine. So like that's a month that you just lose. So it's just not worth it for me. My wife still might go to visit family and things like that without me, but I wouldn't be opposed to going. I think China is probably one of the safest countries in the world besides New Zealand to be in. And like there's certain cities that they're starting to have some cases again, though, if people don't know, but they're really good about breaking it down and tracing it and stopping it.
We're looking at going end of year, maybe in October, to time it around the time of the Canton Fair.
If they have it in person again, October,
Right.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It honestly really just depends on how things will develop this year. I know I do have I have a close family friend who had to really apply to fly back to China just because of a family emergency. They're not letting everyone go back right now, or fly to China right now, and you need to have a negative antibody test as well as a negative COVID test.
48 hours before you get on the plane, you have to have the test. Yeah.
Yep. So all that fun stuff right now is going on for us, me and Eddie personally. As soon as things get better, I will need to fly back just because there's so many things lined up. But again, it just really depends on how the vaccine works out.
To that point, like Jeff, like what you're saying is like all these fairs are now becoming virtual. Like the toy fair became virtual. Canton is becoming virtual. You can do a virtual tour of someone's booth and see the list of their products. Yeah. And believe me, it's much better on your feet. So I don't know. I think that like this technology,
Alibaba, their website really was born out of SARS.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Like that's really why they built, because of SARS, there was a decrease of US travel in what was that, 2006? And because of that, they built an online version of that so that they could still interact with people. So
Jennifer was telling me Taobao as well was born out of that. Yeah.
And so I think one of the things we'll see, post-vaccine, getting back to normal is this concept of like, what does the new normal look like? I've realized that I don't have to go do this. Now, some of us might yearn to like hang out with each other again. And so the value of going to a trade show could be the content. It could be the sponsorship that we do. And it could be just seeing our friends we haven't seen in a long time. And it might end up being, meetups that start occurring where we're like, okay, let's all go down to Carlos's meetup in Miami just so we can all hang out because we have our shots and, we're comfortable with that now. So I think that'll be an interesting kind of roll off as we roll into 2021. But I think I agree with you. I think it's at the earliest it's Q3. I don't see there being enough of an economy of scale of any of this in Q1 or 2 to really move the needle.
Well, I think too, if you think about just like how big this market expanded, people love convenience, and people who, had never shopped online before are now shopping online, and you have an aging population. And, like as people get older, that convenience is going to become more and more relevant. So, I completely agree with Robin and Brandon that there is still an experience of being in store. I think Peloton knocks that out of the park. Most people go in, they try out the Peloton, then they go home and actually order it online. So it's almost at that point, like, is their website just acting like a POS terminal that you have in your home as opposed to running your card there? But when I think about just like my parents, like my family, and like people who were afraid to ever put a credit card into into a machine, let alone into a website, now everyone's doing it. I think the market size overall expanded, and it takes, it's kind of what I mentioned when I first came on. It takes something like an event this large to create, that many new buyers. So, I mean,
cashless commerce is another one, right? Like how many of us are now using Venmo or Apple Pay or Google Pay because we don't want to pull the credit card out. And that was something that prior to the pandemic didn't really exist. And if you have a website, and we run an e-commerce business as well, if you have a website, you need to have your e-commerce work for those type of payments. I went to buy a pair of swim trunks, and I got the email. I hit a button. It added to my cart. I double clicked on my phone and I checked out. It was scary how easy it was. And like, that's I think the type of shopping experience that people are looking for.
Amazon's taken that to another level. You just go and pick stuff off the shelf and walk out the store.
Yes.
True.
Yeah.
And now that'll catch on more because people don't want to even talk to anyone or look at anyone or touch it, have anyone touching their stuff.
Or think about like what Rachel said with QR codes. Like think about being able to walk into a store, open up the company's app, scan a QR code, put in your size, double click, walk out, and it sends you that, that's the mixture of what Peloton has with in-store shopping, where you might still want to go try some stuff on, but they don't carry every color. They just carry kind of a broad mix, and you're not really walking out with any bags. You're just, buying. But the infrastructure has to be there. What we talked about way earlier in the conversation, right? The infrastructure has to be there to be able to support that kind of growth.
And those ghost stores, they're talking about selling the technology to all these other stores, so we don't have to wait for Amazon stores to expand. That'll be everywhere. Also, Alexa.
So explain what you mean by a ghost store for people that don't know.
The ghost store is what I forget who just mentioned it. Brandon, I think it was you, that it's cashless. You just go in. There's no card. There's no anything. You just walk in there, grab your stuff, and you leave.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming.
Well, then there's also the version of ghost stores where like they're doing in the restaurants where the store has no storefront. Like Chipotle's opening these. You order on your app, and you pull up to a store that maybe has a door, and you push a button, and your food comes out.
Oh,
you don't go through the counter service anymore.
I haven't seen that one. But
yeah, Chipotle just had an article about these new touchless, cashless stores that they're opening that don't require them to have any seating. So now they're taking a 4, 5, 6,000 square foot store and able to do it in 1,000 square feet.
I love it. I love Chipotle too, so that's a huge win for me.
It's a double win, right?
Alexa, hey, look, he's eating Chipotle now. Alexa just rolled out in their newsletter how they're opening a lot of stuff up for smart fridges. So I think we're getting to a point where you're going to let your fridge know what you want to have in there, and it's going to monitor expiration dates, how much milk you have left, just all that stuff, and automatically do that order. So that's pretty wild.